Morning, everyone, and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of Arts, Parks, and LA River. I am joined by my colleagues David Rue, Curran Price, and Bob Blumenfield. And we will officially begin the meeting. And we have lots of public comments on several of the items. So what we'll do is before we begin those agenda items, and we'll have 1 through 6. We'll just go ahead and hear the public comments since cards are filled out for every item. And what we'll do is, if you filled out a comment card for any one item or all items and general public comment, you'll have 2 minutes on all of the items combined and then 1 minute for general public comment. So we will begin with that, and we will start with Wayne Spindler. If you'd step up to provide your comment.
I filled out the cards myself. Yeah. That's right. Okay. So today we talk about, we're doing the general bullshit first and then the items?
That's right.
Oh, okay.
General public comment.
Yeah, so now we're here today for this bullshit committee, and we're here today to raise money for nobody, for nothing at all. And of course, all of that water you see out of the sky given to us by Jesus Christ, not fucking Allah, Jesus Christ. Of course you're going to lower our water rates with all that extra water, right? These criminal assholes, they'll keep raising our rates even if it rains for the next 20 years every day. Fuck you all, because you should be lowering our rates. LA Times on Sunday read we have 22% more electrical capacity than we use. The DWP is ripping us off. Fuck the DWP. Oh, what's next now? Okay. Number 1, LA Kids for Steering Committee. We should not be teaching kids to drive and steer vehicles. Wait till they're old enough to listen to Madonna, and then they can drive. Number 2, the Historical General Fund. The history of City Hall is corruption. You don't want to read that. You go to the FBI and ask them about the city of LA history. They will tell you what happened. Item 3, Greater Los Angeles Zoo Association salaries. Bullshit. Shut it down. Shut it down. Make these motherfuckers refund their money. That zoo looks like shit off the 5 freeway. I've seen it. Number 4, accessibility for the disability. You have to do that shit. Failure to comply with the ADA will result in the 1 o'clock meeting. You know what happens at 1 o'clock? Go to room 1070. You'll see me there. Yes. Number 5, the marketing program for the zoo. You belong to the zoo, the San Diego Zoo. If you want to go to a real zoo, go to the San Diego Zoo. That's a real zoo. This zoo we have here in Griffith Park next to the golf course is what you call an amalgamated bunch of bullshit without proper planning. They killed an animal. They killed an elephant, for Christ's sakes. How do you kill an elephant? With a very big gun. Just ask Herb Wesson. And then, number 6, the concession programs. Overcharging children for beverages and popcorn is a federal offense. Give the kids free popcorn and free bottled water.
Armando Herman. 1 minute general public comment and 2 minutes for all of your other comments. And
I'm on a bitch.
Please stay on the topic.
That's what Carol Goodson said in the Daily News.
Starting.
Yeah, Carol Goodson said that in the Daily News July 12th regarding my general public comment to bitch, bitch, bitch. This is general public comment, rookie. Listen, rookie, don't interrupt my general public comment. This is only 1 minute. It's only 1 minute, 60 seconds. I can't even speak, and you're interrupting me while I'm doing my job.
So the speaker should either...
Oh, my time! He can interrupt me while I'm talking, goddammit! I'm trying to be a friendly speaker!
Right.
ADA violation of my...
Hold the time for just a second. And if you're not going to stay on topic, they can put it back to 25 seconds. Then
Would
you're going
you
to forfeit
please?
the rest of your time. Are you going to forfeit the rest of your time? Is that your choice?
No, sir.
All right, let's
Are you threatening me? Okay. Pinky.
start the clock.
No, Mr. Chair, what were you saying to me earlier? I kind of got a little distracted by all this commotion. But I really would like for the city to refrain from the subjects on item 1 because LA kids do not steering committees report to the programmatic positions. No?
Okay,
Fund.
2 minutes for the items.
Yeah.
Now, as you all know, when it comes to fucking kids in Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles don't give a rat's ass about your children. They don't. That's item 1. Let's go to item 2. We're talking about zoo, animals, woof, woof, and dogs, and little lions. Wow! And then we go to item 3 regarding the department's report relative to full listing of Greater Los Angeles Association. Salaries? Fuck your salaries. Let the kids go to the zoo for free. All kids. And even elderly. No. But Grandpa, they don't let me into the zoo without you because I'm a minor. Yeah, fucking poverty pimps. Those dumbass Democrats. Now let's go to item 4. With the rookie over there looking down on me. Accessibility. Title 1, Title 2 discrimination prohibits even the entity of the zoo from discriminating against any individual with a partial or impartial, visible or invisible disability to be discouraged to participate at the zoo. Fuck you. And then I go to item number 5, the motion for Los Angeles Zoo Department report relative to the zoo marketing program. I got a marketing program for you. Bitch, bitch, bitch. Because all those animals don't deserve to be hooked and shot and killed and slaughtered because you guys don't have a budget? What the fuck's wrong with you? Leave our animals alone, or I'll bring my comfort pet so he can woo, woo, woo. So don't discriminate. And then the last item, 666. Yeah. The Los Angeles Department reports relative to the concession programs to Mitch O'Farrell, the bitch. Thank you, Carol Gordonson.
So, for everyone who is understandably horrified and mystified by what they're hearing, just know that we have to abide by the First Amendment, and it provides the ability of anyone, no matter how ill-informed or ignorant they are, to say whatever they want during public comment, and that's just part of the deal in public life. So I apologize on their behalf, but it's something that we must abide to, especially for anyone who is here for the first time and just sat through that display of profound ignorance. That's what we have to do. So we will now go with Karen Law from the Los Angeles Food Policy Council on item 6. Thank you for coming.
Does this one work? Okay.
Yes.
Hi, good morning, council members. My name is Karen Law. I'm the Luskin Leaders Fellow with the LA Food Policy Council, here to speak on item 6, which is regarding the concessions program. So we are here today to express our continued support for the inclusion of the city's good food purchasing policy into the LA Zoo's RFPs. So as you know, departments across the city have incorporated this policy into their RFPs, and this is an exciting opportunity for the LA Zoo to join these departments. In addition to being a citywide policy, the city's good food purchasing policy is a priority for Councilmember Kretz, who authored the original motion and specifically mentioned last time this item came up that he wanted to be certain that the policy was included into the new RFPs with the zoo. So as Gloza and the zoo continue to draft their RFPs and concession contracts, we really hope that they will include the city's good food purchasing policy and continue to demonstrate the city's commitment to not only animal welfare, but environmental sustainability, local economies, fair living, fair wage jobs, and healthy eating. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And we have Yvette Cerna here from the City Controller's Office.
morning, members of this committee. My name is Yvette Cerna.
Good
from
morning,
City
and just
Control.
pause for just a second. There have been 2 interruptions from Armando Herman since the last speaker began, and the second one just occurred as Ms. Cerna begins her remarks. So 2 interruptions, you get 1 more chance. Please continue, Ms. Cerna.
Okay. As you mentioned, I'm with the City Controller's Office. I'm here to inform this committee that our office is currently conducting an audit that touches on items 2 through 6 on today's agenda. We cannot disclose specifics at this time, but our office is more than happy to brief you all and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, colleagues, what I would like to do is move item number 1 on consent if there are no objections. Item 1 on consent. Seeing as no objections, that shall be the order. We will take items 2 through 6. Multiple items on the zoo. Mr. Sutton-Willis, will you please read items 2 through 6 before we begin the presentation?
Item number 2, Los Angeles Zoo Department report relative to the department's historical general fund contribution subsidy. Item number 3, Los Angeles Zoo Department report relative to the full listing of the Greater Los Angeles Zoo Association's salaries and operating expenses. Item number 4, the Los Angeles Zoo Department report relative to the accessibility of the Los Angeles Zoo and minimizing barriers to people visiting the zoo. Item number 5, Los Angeles Zoo Department report relative to the zoo's marketing program. Item number 6, Los Angeles Zoo Department reports relative to the concessions program and the memorandum of understanding between the Los Angeles Zoo Department and the Greater Los Angeles Zoo Association.
Great. Thank you. So we have joining us today from the Los Angeles Zoo, we have General Manager John Lewis and our Assistant General Manager, whose last name escapes me as I'm speaking here.
Denise Verret.
My apologies, Denise. And then we will also be joined in some of the subsequent agenda items by Connie Morgan of Gloza and Dov Lizzle of the City Attorney's Office as necessary. So what we'll do, colleagues, is we'll take the items one by one and we'll just do Q&A item by item, but we'll hear them all in cascading order. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. And as you just said, we're going to go through the different items. Different speakers will cover them. John Lewis, the General Manager from the Los Angeles Zoo. And I've said this before to other committees, Mr. Chair, but you kind of explained, but I'm amazed. We hear this once in a while, the public comments, and you all have to deal with it every time you have a committee meeting. So thank you for that. Anyway. The first item here regarding the historical general fund support, I'm going to let the Assistant General Manager, Denise Verret, carry that one, please.
Good morning, committee members. The report before you was provided in response to an action taken as part of the 2016-17 adopted budget. It provides information on the department's historical general fund contribution for both direct and indirect costs, including a chart with detailed information from the department's creation in 1997-98 through the current 2016-17 adopted budget. The general fund contribution for operating direct cost peaked in fiscal year 2005-2006 at $10.6 million, and today we receive no subsidy at all for our direct operations from the general fund. However, all of our related costs, such as pensions and benefits, are funded by the general fund. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about the details in the chart or in the report itself. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay. Thank you. So just if you could, you just mentioned pension and other funding for city employees coming out of the general fund. So can you explain in greater detail the contributions that the zoo department has received and how we can reduce the general fund reliance, having said that we're aware that no direct budgetary contributions are made, but there is a clear understanding and reality that you do receive general fund assistance through those other measures. So if you could talk a little bit about some of the other, some more detail about that, and then the measures taken again to reduce general fund reliance based on the model that we're working with for the zoo?
So the related costs that are allocated to the zoo department, like all other council control departments, are reflected annually in the budget in a document that's called Exhibit G. And Exhibit G is sort of an allocation of all the costs that are attributed to a department's indirect operations. So utilities, there's a wastewater component, there's the pensions and the benefits, the departmental services that we receive from like the personnel department, the city attorney's office. Those are all costs that are allocated that make up the indirect or related cost of our operations. So while some of them are more labor related in terms of positions, the others are more service related. So also like fleet maintenance and services that we would get from general services. So the way we can control those costs are mostly related to the labor side of our operations and the operations as it relates to, fleet and things of that nature. But we are more focused on the labor side, but, our costs can vary from one year to the next, and the cost of those are not necessarily within our control. So the best that we could do is by controlling it from our labor side, but the costs themselves we don't really control.
So is Exhibit G related to the comparative budget info that you provided in the report?
Yes, if you look on the chart and you go down to at the sort of almost to the bottom where it says related cost, it's not detailed in there, but that's where all those costs lie. So that's the pensions, the utilities, the benefits. It's all in that line item that says related cost. So in the last column, it would be for 16, 17, $13 million is what the related costs represent. Do you see that line? I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just kind of in my head kind of going through it and the itemized reasons for the related costs. Okay.
So just to follow up on the question. So
Sure.
13 million is all the costs you mentioned. It's the labor, it's pensions and all that.
Correct.
But it's not salaries. It's pensions, benefits, utilities, indirect costs from the different departments.
Right. And we have this for every worker around the city. But this is if you wanted to quantify where it's all coming, it's 13 million, which is a lot. I mean, compared to, even is that the biggest cost? I guess the zoo appropriation is 20.
Correct. And then another $13 million, so it makes the total cost of our operations $33 million for the current fiscal year.
Right, of which, a little more than a third is these other related costs.
Correct.
Is the sort of the back house subsidy, so to speak.
And by definition, reimbursements from the general fund.
Yes.
Yeah, right. So, okay. So there's no line item allocation, but just a reimbursement system for these related costs.
And I don't know that it's a reimbursement because the general fund sort of pays them directly in other funds that lie in other places. So like the benefits is paid out of the Human Resources Benefit Fund that the Personnel Department administers. It's just budgeted in those other locations.
And you got to be careful there because you don't want to end up double counting line item wise. So these are costs that are accounted for in the general fund under other subtopics that are out there. So there may be a pension contribution, et cetera, et cetera. But to break out of those general fund costs, this is how much is going into the zoo each year, which is substantial.
Mr. Chair, one of the things that I've said in past budget years on this particular question is, and not just for the zoo, but I think that with the exception maybe of pensions and the benefits, that the other items ought to be appropriated to the individual department budget. How can you manage a budget if you don't have it? And I think that you will find that the different departments will manage it. I know we will at the zoo because any dollar that we can save on utilities means a dollar we can do on conservation. So that's one recommendation on how I think you can get better control of those costs.
Okay, so we'll Bob, we'll come back to you. Mr. Rue, Mr. Price, anything on questions or concerns on item 2?
I'm going to ask it.
We'll do a little later? All right, all right. So what I'm going to recommend on item 2, anything else, Mr. Blumenfield?
Yeah.
I'm going to make a few recommendations, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and just trying to understand the chart here. The Zoo Enterprise Fund is 2.4 million, and that comes from 50% of the membership fee, right?
No, so the Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund is a special fund that was established where all of our revenues go into, everything that we collect, all of the money. And that's how we pay for our operating budget. That particular line item represents whatever cash available is in that fund that's available to offset the budget. So it's either surplus revenues that came in from a prior year or under expenditures and our operating expenses. So there's sometimes a cash balance that remains, and if there is, we use that to sort of make up the difference in our overall operating budget.
So that's not the sum total of the Enterprise Fund?
No, actually, the entire $20 million that you see, or $22 million, is all what's going to come into the Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund over the fiscal year. So everything above that is what goes into the Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund. That one line item is just like, this is the beginning balance in the Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund that we use.
From the previous year.
Right, so the bottom line, the Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund is 20 million.
Yeah, actually, it's 22.9 million.
Okay. It looks like it says 23A1 here, but.
That's the budget appropriation.
Mm-hmm. So it's 22, and that money is a combination. What is the revenue source for that money?
It's admissions, it's our portion of the concessions, it's membership, it's the nighttime ticketed event, it's education programs, it's our parking lot rental, our preferred parking. It's all of the revenue that we collect and reimbursements that we would get.
It's what portion of admissions?
Admissions is 14.2 million of the 22 million. So little.
And membership is how much?
That budgeted amount is 1.5 million.
So 14.2 is direct from the
collection of admissions revenue.
Admissions, and then the other 1.2 you said is from.
1.5 comes from membership, and 1.2 is nighttime ticketed events. 1.1 is concessions. They're all on that chart, but yes, it's kind of small. I know. I'm sorry.
Okay, no. Trying to understand it all, and then there's something about at the end of the report. It's at 134 for overtime reimbursement. Is one of those lines. What does that mean?
So when there are evening events that require our staff to facilitate them, they work overtime, and then we get reimbursed from Gloza to pay for the overtime to staff the event.
Okay. Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're going to be, a lot of these reports are for informational purposes, so we're going to be noting and filing, but we'll definitely take a closer look at your comparative budget info, and I'm sure more questions will come up. But let's, so my recommendation is to note and file the zoo report dated November 17th, as it is for informational purposes. And let's go on to item 3, and I believe we'll be joined by Gloza for this one.
Yes, please.
We have brought Gloza trustee Phyllis Kupferstein with us.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Is charged with one of our, with the compensation committee.
So you have before you this report that was requested to outline the salaries and expenses from Gloza, and I'll let Connie and the trustee kind of answer any questions that you might have about the report.
Sure, and I'm sorry, Phyllis, your last name again?
Kupferstein.
Kupferstein?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. would you like to, any comments, or
We thought
or do we
you
just
might have questions.
just go into the questions? Okay, we'll just go into the questions. All right, that's fine. So just running down my list, and then we'll open it up for my colleagues. We know that there are bonuses that are offered to Gloza executives and employees. Are they issued annually?
The bonuses are issued annually. They are determined by the compensation committee of the board. Well, the compensation committee makes a recommendation after doing an annual review, reviewing the past year's progress, setting forth goals for the next year, doing an informal survey of similar institutions to determine what would be in line for the executives. Then we make a recommendation to the full board, and the full board votes on that.
So the amount of the bonus is related to performance in the
Absolutely.
in the role of the office. And are they, is there a limit to the percentage of the base salary, or can bonuses be just any general amount, or what are your guidelines for bonuses?
Our guidelines are past performance, history, overall compensation, and as I said, annually we do attempt at least an informal survey of similar compensation for similar executives and similar institutions, both locally and across the country. And
Annually you do that?
we do that. And then 2 years ago, we actually hired Towers Watson to conduct an independent third-party review to determine where we stood, again, with local institutions and national institutions. And to our relief, discovered we actually were on the low end of the compensation, and felt that we could continue to do what we had been doing annually informally because our information was correct.
And we know that a lot of a handful of salaries in the executive level are very, very high. Do the bonuses ever reach 100% of the base salary?
Oh, never.
So
never.
it's
What
are the general percentages? If someone performs superlatively, what?
I don't think we've ever exceeded 20%. It's usually 10 to 15% range.
Of base salary? Okay. And is that across the board for all Gloza?
Of cash compensation.
Okay. And then are the all classifications of the jobs with Gloza, are they listed? Or what are the vacancies? So it's kind of two questions.
Connie can address other positions with regard to the salary survey, because the board's responsibility is with respect to the president and the chief financial officer.
Councilmember, what is your question?
Oh, so are the classifications of the positions with Gloza, are they publicly noticed or listed? And then are there positions that you need to fill? Are there currently open positions?
The first question was, are they publicly?
Yeah, publicly listed. The classifications
You mean how
of
do
the job
how do
descriptions.
they recruit to fill positions? Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Well, for the most part, we fill positions by posting, publicly at the zoo that they are available, and through the website, and through a number of nonprofit places to find those specific people, or to find them through websites and places that can put us in touch with the right kind of talent. And your second question was, are there any open positions right now? I think the only position open right now is the major gifts position, which we will be seeking to fill as soon as we finish the Beasley Ball. We have a interim person working with us on the ball, and the ball is very important to us this year to do something special for the zoo. So we want to finish that and then reopen that search.
And these positions, are they determined as far as hiring in partnership with the zoo, or is it just only Gloza? Is it a combination in terms of reviewing the submissions or applications?
We are a separate 501c3, and for the most part, we do the hiring based on our needs, our expertise, and the work that we've done to define those positions and to ascertain what is the right type of fit for us. Certainly, we're always looking to find the right type of fit for working with our partners at the zoo. I do realize that when I was hired, of course, the zoo director interviewed me. Well, you were not here yet, but Ed Maresca and Dave Town certainly did. But for the most part, Gloza is an independent 501c3, does its hiring. And as I said, we work very hard to ensure that the fit is going to be right across the board.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about the expenditures that Gloza pays for, just in terms of benefits, commissions, general administrative fees, just the general expenses of running Gloza? What are the expenditures that Gloza pays for out of pocket?
Do you mean solely with respect to employee costs? Or
Yeah, solely with respect to your own funds and your own fundraising.
Well, we pay for all our...
Is it everything?
Everything.
Everything, okay. And so you cover all administrative expenses and commissions, benefits through your fundraising?
Yes, in addition to then, there are the departments where we directly aid the zoo, and obviously we're staffing that ourselves.
Okay. And then are you paying living wage to all employees, concessionaires, contractors, et cetera, including the membership ambassadors?
Yes, the
And
membership ambassadors are absolutely paid the living wage. The way we do it on those that are just entering their position, because they come in at a lower amount, but they are guaranteed to get to the living wage minimum for the first few months until they are able to, through their sales, reach their incentive goals and meet that every month. But we always ensure that everyone gets that minimum.
Because I think we're at $10.50 per hour right now with in the current minimum wage as the wages increases cascade in the coming years. So
Right.
just want to make sure that that's in compliance.
Yeah, well, I think we're paying the living wage right now of $12.52.
Okay. And then, can you talk about what the 4 vice presidents do, the 4 vice presidents of Gloza? Connie, you probably can answer that better than anyone.
Well, first, there is the CFO, who is overseeing the concessions contract, overseeing all of our accounting, overseeing our finance and investments, and generally, is there something else that I have missed, Hugh?
All of the accounting, the finance, the investments, the concessions agreement, IT,
IT.
and purchasing, and the financial relationship and reporting to the zoo.
Okay, and that's under the CFO.
Yeah.
And there are 3 others, right? 3 other vice presidents?
Yes.
And what are they?
There is our HR legal counsel, who is overseeing all of the HR items as Gloza grows, as well as overseeing and reviewing all contracts, of which we do a great many, and ensuring that they are in compliance with our needs and as well as the zoo's needs as they extend to having outside vendors on the property under our auspices.
Okay.
The Vice President of Marketing ensures that we have a vital and supple marketing program that will make the budget for the year and ensure that we are reaching across Greater Los Angeles to market the zoo to a diverse group of Angelenos. And our Vice President of Advancement is in charge of both fundraising and membership. So she oversees the reach into the donor community to raise unrestricted funds, restricted funds for capital projects, or for programming projects that the zoo may need, as well as overseeing gifts that will come to us through estates, through wills, and also oversees the membership department, which has a very healthy budget, and as well as all the ambassadors.
And what level of fringe benefits do these positions receive as part of their compensation package? And are all of these positions eligible for performance bonuses as well?
The CFO position and the president's position are eligible for a bonus. Right now, the advancement position has had one in the past, and that is something we will be looking at. Benefits tend to run about 25%, I believe, above of our overall costs for our employees. Employees receive health benefits and the regular benefits one would associate with being.
And tell me again, it's probably in here, but what's the total employment from Gloza? How many employees total?
We got about 49 full-time people.
45 full-time currently.
Okay.
Position.
Yes.
And our part-time varies because with the introduction of zoo lights and other events like dinosaurs, we have some seasonal employees. Our part-time membership staff runs about 7 or 8.
About 7 or 8 on a regular basis. Okay. All right. And then, so the expense summary in the report shows $5.1 million in expenses for the LA Zoo transfers and program support. Can these expenses be itemized?
Can they be itemized?
Yes.
I'm certain they can.
And are they itemized? Maybe I'm just not seeing it.
Is this what he's talking about?
Yeah, he's talking about these numbers here.
Did you, council member, are you looking at this
I am not,
sheet?
but I will. So is that where they are?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, if you could just go over it for us, that would be great.
Okay.
The
Well,
expense summary. Oh, it's right here. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're talking about Zoo Surplus Development Fund, Zoo Assistance Fund, restricted project funding. Is that what we're talking about? Okay. And this is the projection for 15-16. And the actual is slightly higher. Actually, let me back up. So what is the actual? I was looking at the actual for 14-15.
the actual, I'll have to find the budget for the year. Let's see if I brought it with me. I believe I may have.
We'd have to get the actual numbers for you.
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
that would be
These
helpful.
We have when we wrote the report.
All right. So what I'd like to do is see if Mr. Rudy, any questions on
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
You know, it's for, especially for our listeners, just to try to simplify the whole budget. Roughly, this year's operating budget was about $33 million, roughly, for the zoo, and $20 million from the Zoo Enterprise Fund, and 13 is from the indirect contribution for the general fund.
Correct.
Right. And technically, the zoo doesn't get any extra general fund, but this is what all departments get. So can you tell me the relationship between Gloza and the zoo when it comes to budgets, how much the Gloza contributes towards operating?
Oh, yeah.
Ms. Barrett will respond initially.
So of the roughly $20 million in our direct operating budget, approximately about $3.5 million comes from revenues that are provided by Gloza, revenues or reimbursements, because we get reimbursements as well.
3.5, and that's, and obviously it's been going up, well, went down a little bit, but is roughly going up every year because the general fund contribution from the general fund is going down. But also, isn't there the Gloza marketing refund? So is it 3.3 minus 1.6?
No, it would be, it's not inclusive of that. That's because that's not part of our direct budget, so that would be on top of that.
No, so What I'm asking, what does the refund mean then?
Oh, so as part of our MOU for marketing, we have a revenue sharing arrangement, and they get a portion of the revenue that we collect from admissions and nighttime ticketed events, and the $1.5 million is what is budgeted for the revenue share for this current fiscal year.
So technically, they contribute, just for simplicity, they contribute about 3.4 million, but then we, because of our agreement, we refund them back 1.57.
Actually, it's more than that. You would take the 3.3 is what stays with us no matter what for our direct operating budget. The 1.5 kind of comes in and goes back out. So the 1.5 doesn't really, it's a separate amount. You could add the two together if you wanted to know the total amount that comes to our operating budget. So it's almost $5 million. Because in theory, if we achieve the goals, they get the 1.5 million back because we collect the admissions money. They give us all of the nighttime ticketed event money. We get a portion of that we keep for our operating budget, which is 13.85 million for the current fiscal year, and then they would get the 1.5 million.
Okay, so let me go to the next question first
Okay.
then. So the agreement with Gloza is we share in the admissions because they do all the marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then is it just the nighttime admissions or daytime admissions as well?
We share in both.
In both.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you call it? Sharing breakdown between the admissions revenue for Gloza and for the zoo.
So for the current fiscal year, admissions revenue and nighttime ticketed event revenue is projected to be approximately $15.4 million. And then we keep $13,850,000, and they get the difference, and the difference is the $1,576,000.
So is it like a 80-20 split, or is it just you get a baseline and then anything above that they keep?
We get a baseline, and anything above that they receive back up to what's in the budget. So we are supposed to get $13,850,000. And anything above that, up to $1.5 million, they get as
up to 1.5.
Up to what this budget, the budgeted amount is.
So if the revenue came in 20 million, then they get 1.5 and you get the rest?
Correct.
So, so still in essence, we're giving them a refund of the 1.75. That's the maximum they could get back.
1.57, yes.
1.57. So earlier on, when they contributed 3.3, so technically, if we do the whole flow chart, I mean, help me understand, because you're saying 5 million, because they're not giving us 5 million, they're giving us 1.7.
Okay, so follow me if you can.
Yeah.
So we share the admissions and nighttime ticketed event revenue. But there's also other agreements that govern the percentage of membership revenue that we receive, the percentage of concessions revenue that we receive, and they also go and get grants for other programs that we administer, and we get reimbursements from overtime. All of that goes into our direct operating budget, and roughly total, it's about $5 million. But in that is the marketing refund that they are entitled to receive should admissions and nighttime ticketed events achieve the goal such that we get $13.85 million and then they would get $1.57 million back.
That's assuming if the revenue comes in at the 14.
At the $15.4 million,
Right.
correct.
And anything above that we get.
Correct.
Okay, so I guess you're saying it's two different pots.
Correct.
Well, the other question I have is maybe it's for the city attorney, but then the Zoo Enterprise Fund, trust fund. Can we can we find out how this money is received, allocated, and distributed through the through this fund? Can you answer that? Or?
I sure can. So it's a special fund that was set up by ordinance when the zoo department was created, and it was set up for the purposes of receiving all monies that support the operations and maintenance of the zoo. So all the revenue that we receive goes into that fund, and when we were getting a general fund appropriation, the general fund would go into that Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund. That's how we pay our salaries and our expenses and everything that supports our operations. Everything goes into that fund. But it's an enterprise fund, so anything that's not spent stays in that fund. Even the general fund, historically, it would stay in that Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund, and it can't go out of there unless it's a budgetary action or the council and the mayor approve an expenditure from the fund. So it is where all of our money goes into, all of our revenue, and then all of our expenditures go out of that fund as well.
And if I may, just to add historical perspective on that, in the mid-'90s, the zoo was pretty run down and just about lost its accreditation with the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And that's when the zoo was separated from Rec and Parks at the time to give it more kind of control over its destiny, if you will. And the enterprise fund was set up to allow, one, the zoo to manage its budget, but also focus on its needs. And when we were getting a general fund support, typical year, we would use those leftover funds to do major maintenance repairs, minor capital projects, or launch a new program. But now it's just being used to support our ongoing budget.
Okay. So, yeah, no, I mean, obviously, it would be great to get, and I'm sure the chair is going to ask for a follow-up report, but it would be great to get all the different breakdowns of all the different line items where we're sharing with Gloza and exactly how much is coming in, so it's more transparent and clear. So going back roughly, so you're saying we get from Gloza, if we add all the different sources of revenues up, and after all the refunds and reimbursements we give them, we net $5 million?
Yes, I'm gonna.
Because that's really hard to figure out from.
Yeah. But do you have something you want to add?
Well, it's, again, I would just go to the way the structure works. It breeds confusion when you're trying to come
It
to
does,
it and
yeah.
try to figure out what's going on. So from our perspective, there are different MOUs that govern different things. And while it is true that the $14.5 million comes into the zoo through the box office, it's getting there because of the marketing efforts. And we are spending that $1.5 million as well as spending more money that we are raising through sponsorships and through other sources. We're putting those together to spend more than, to spend well over $2 million a year to market the zoo.
Right.
So that's why you see some of that.
Right.
Then there's money that flows into their operating budget from things that we do through fundraising and other areas. And then there's other money that flows into capital projects that's not a part of your operating budget as well. So
the first question is, it would be great if we get a breakdown of all of those different agreements and MOUs, and in a simplified, maybe chart manner that shows exactly what's coming in and what the breakdown is. But the overall arching question is just because it's so confusing to wrap your head around this. So our total support or net revenue we get from Gloza through all their efforts, whether it's marketing efforts for admissions, fundraising efforts, grant writing, all of that, the zoo gets $5 million? That's what I heard?
Like you're talking about total efforts, that includes the box
Not
office.
effort. I'm saying net after we give all the reimbursements back, because there's a lot of reimbursements we give back to Gloza.
that one. It's that one.
It's just that $1.5 million.
And so if you take out the 1.
Overtime reimbursement, contract reimbursement. I mean, there's, just other, I'm sure it's all administrative stuff, but I'm saying I want to figure out what the net revenue net contribution.
And the net contribution to our direct operating budget, that's around $20 million, is about $3.5 million. Of the $20 million budget, the net contribution is about $3.5 million, and that's from concessions, membership, nighttime ticketed events, and miscellaneous reimbursements that we get. But I'm happy to provide a detailed revenue sharing so that you can see it.
But didn't you also say we get another 1.5?
I'm netting out the 1.5 because we don't get to keep that towards our operating budget. It goes back to Gloza as a marketing refund.
Okay. So, and then for the marketing, I know, so the increase in marketing that Gloza does the Gloza and the zoo measure up with the city's goals of generating new and diversified funding, including the zoo attendance and overall earned revenue? So I know there's a report, there's about 2% increase. I mean, is that, at par with what the city expects?
You just submitted that marketing and
Yeah, on the
MOU
biennial
report on
report.
Friday. I brought it, Denise, if you'd like it.
Yeah, there's a report that addresses all of that that was just submitted on Friday, so it'll be coming to your committee. It was referred to this committee shortly, so we can, you want to try to address it?
John, which
I mean,
report
it's
is
not
that?
on the agenda, so I'm not sure if I should talk about it, because we just...
Yeah, if it's not agendized, but
Okay.
but I can...
I'll save that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and what I can do is fold it into my recommendations. But what's the report called?
It's the second biannual report on the marketing MOU.
Okay, yeah. And we're going to talk about marketing at item 5 as well.
Okay, I'll stop there for
Oh,
now.
that's okay.
Sorry for
Mr.
taking so
Price.
much time.
Oh, no worries. That's
Good question, Mr. Councilman Hall.
Mr. Price.
I've got just one question on source of funds under your expenditures here. And it looks like we got $3 million for visitor amenities. Just curious, what does that involve and include?
I'm sorry, which number, Councilman?
Source of funds, under source of funds, you have an item, visitor amenities, $3 million entry.
I would defer to Gloza, because that's a source of funds to Gloza's budget, but I believe visitor amenities is concessions revenue, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not sure.
It's
Right.
retail food, it's retail concessions,
Ah.
food concessions.
You say retail concessions, food concessions, and tram?
Yes.
Very confusing.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Blumenfield.
Great, thanks. Appreciate all the information here. The salaries are paid out of the Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund, is that correct?
Yes, for the zoo's budget, correct.
And are the bonuses also paid out of the Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund?
No, so that's Gloza's budget, which is paid out of Gloza's own accounts and funds.
So where do the funds come from for Gloza's own funds?
They come from money raised by Gloza.
Well, when you say money raised by Gloza, that includes the membership. Is that correct?
It includes the unrestricted fundraising that Gloza does to support its operations.
It's solely unrestricted funds that are raised?
It's on that, it's on the salaries report, if you go to the third page.
Right.
So that, your hand is on it right now. So this is the overall budget for Gloza, and at the bottom is the source of funds to their budget.
Okay, so it does include membership revenue.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
And it includes it includes contributions, but it also includes all the monetization of the city asset.
Yes.
Which is essentially there's basically three sources of revenue, the way I look at it. You've got, money that comes in through the door, be it membership dollars or admissions, because they kind of cannibalize each other. You have the monetization of the asset itself, which is public, concessions, all these other things, and then you have sort of the Betty Whites of the world, the people who are making contributions just out of their pocket to the zoo. Those are the sort of the three main sources as I look at it. Two of those sources, to my eyes, are public dollars, the monetization and the admission, and the third is really private dollars. So the bonuses come from, they don't just come from the contributions, they come from the monetization of the funds, but they don't come from the Zoo Enterprise Fund, and they don't come from the admissions, they come from that third fund. Okay.
I would, safe to say they're probably coming from unrestricted fundraising, but
How is it safe to say that?
because it's a very few people.
It's what?
It's just a very few people that are getting.
Right, but it's not broken out. I mean,
Right.
I'm assuming that membership revenue, all these things get put in together. So you can't really say it's coming from,
Well,
please.
Sure. Introduce yourself, too.
I'm Hugh Miller. I'm the CFO of Gloza. I've been the CFO for a little over a year. Actually, each of the Gloza programs, such as nighttime events, membership, have its own P&L. The salaries of the Gloza people that work under that P&L are expenses of those events. All of the profit from those events or those activities is transferred to the zoo. So, for example, membership, we will take in the membership money, a certain amount of money off the top goes to the zoo. All of the expenses of running the membership program, including the Gloza personnel who are directly responsible, are deducted, and then the profit from the membership is transferred to the zoo. On the nighttime events, only the people that are directly associated with the revenue of those events appear on that P&L, and the profit from those events are transferred to the zoo. So when you say that there's only two other, so the Gloza sources of funds, what you call monetization of the facility, those funds after deduction of the Gloza personnel that are directly attributed to those events are all transferred to the zoo. Gloza receives a 7.5% fee for fundraising.
Unrestricted gifts.
Unrestricted fundraising. And Gloza receives 3% fee for managing the concessions. All of the other money, other than that, is transferred to the zoo in concessions. So when you say the bonuses or the salaries of the remaining people who are pretty much administrative, those funds are paid from unrestricted Gloza fundraising, or the 7.5% from the restricted fundraising, or the 3% from the commissions.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
No, that does. I mean, so if you were to look at, you know, when you look at any nonprofit and you see what the ratio of sort of administrative costs to program costs, that might make the administrative costs artificially high for those contributions if that's the only place where that's coming from.
It actually makes the costs lower because most of our costs are program related, and therefore program costs. Very little of a small amount of our salaries and total salaries and administrative fee costs are administrative costs.
Further, you're not seeing the restricted fundraising really coming in here too, which takes a lot of time from the staff to generate. So if you spread those costs among all of that other income, you'll.
But that's the one where you get the 7.5%.
Yes.
So theoretically, that's covered. So if somebody gives you $100, their $7.5 is going to basically the raising of that money.
Yes. Which is
on a restricted grant, 3 on an unrestricted, in theory, and then you
3% on the concessions.
On the concessions?
Yes.
Right. I guess unrestricted is unrestricted.
So if you really wanted to look at Gloza, you can look at the programs that we actually put on or services that we manage on behalf of the zoo, concessions, membership, nighttime events. Each of those, we prepare a separate P&L, and all the charges of those activities are charged to that P&L, and the profit from those activities is 100% transferred to the zoo.
Right.
Except in the case of concessions, where we retain 3% of the gross.
And if I may, that's profits minus the fiduciary responsibilities based on the cost to Gloza, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Including salaries.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's legitimate budgeting, but there's a lot of it's tricky as you look at it because of what are the costs that go into any given event, because you're going to a portion of each salary of the people working on it.
They're all only the direct costs are charged to those events, and then there's a small amount of allocated costs where we time our time that get charged to. Maybe we provide some accounting services for something like that, and a few people in the accounting department. maybe a little bit of my time, because I'm doing that. But it is very, we have P&Ls that we provide to the zoo for every event, every activity, which delineates in detail all of the line items of costs, which we go over and review with the zoo in detail.
And then when you say it goes to the zoo, it goes into the Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund, which then funds everything. Is that right?
Yeah, the profits do.
The profits go into the Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund, which is the fund that you use to pay everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
We want to pay the zoo's expenses.
So if you were to look, you
Not our
can
expenses.
you can see most of these things.
It's not your expenses? It's not Gloza salaries?
No,
No.
we're not a part of the Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund. We're a separate 501c3.
That's just for the zoo/city budget is the enterprise trust.
So we only contribute to the Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund. We do not take any money from it.
Okay, because when I asked at the beginning of this, I said, are the salaries paid out of the Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund? I thought I heard you say yes at the beginning
Zoo
of this.
salaries, zoo employee salaries.
The answer is
Hang
no.
on. So when you asked the question initially, we did say yes, but then we realized you were talking about the Gloza salaries. It's no for the Gloza salaries. It's yes for the city salaries.
Okay, maybe I wasn't clear, because
Yeah. All right.
I was looking at the Gloza page saying, are these salaries paid out of the Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund?
No.
And I heard the answer yes, but it was miscommunication, so it's making a little more sense
Yeah. Good.
now as far as that goes. And that's why I did the follow-up about the bonuses, which obviously the bonuses are not paid out of that if the salaries aren't. I got you on that. And then I have to add, I mean, you said that it's never exceeded 20%. The bonus has never exceeded 20%. Is that what?
Of total cash compensation for the two executives, yes.
Okay. Because for whatever reason, I've been given different information about the numbers. So like, for
Monty's
example,
telling me hers might be a little higher. There's a range, and it may have gone as high as 30%, but I don't think, but when I'm talking about total cash compensation.
I mean, like the president's 266 on the chart, and a 20% salary would make that 319. I've heard different numbers that are considerably more than that. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
That is very close to the, so it may be as high, I may have misspoke and did the math wrong, but I don't think it's more than 30%, because I'm trying to, it's in that range, you know. And I know that from our compensation surveys, and certainly the one that Towers Watson did, that we, as I said again, we were below the 50th percentile for comparable institutions.
Okay.
And my recollection was that, you know, the percentage was, as I had stated before, you know, from the low end of, you know, 10%, so the high end maybe the 30% figure.
Okay, so 30%, which would be 346 or something like that as a number. I didn't do the math, but that's what it sounds like. Okay, then you said of comparable organizations. What is a comparable organization? Is there any? Because I didn't think we had anything like this. I mean, it's an amazing thing that we have, but in terms of like San Diego Zoo, other zoos, don't they work very differently?
Some have public-private partnerships. Some have an entirely private support group, as we do in Gloza. They looked at other nonprofits within the city and county of Los Angeles, other zoos within the state and nationally. Do you recall, Connie, some of the other?
Well, I mean, they would be looking across the board of the major nonprofit organizations in the city, whether they're associated with the city or not. You know, it could be the Natural History Museum, it could be LACMA, it could be
the Science Center.
The Science Center, it could be
the library.
The library, it could be the Hammer Museum, it could be any number of different entities.
It's going to be hard because in many ways the job's very different because it's both a vendor and a nonprofit fundraiser. So I mean, I say that out there it's a hard thing for you to find a comparable to because it's both.
I don't necessarily agree because if the Natural History Museum would be having to conduct all of those same things that we're doing. So,
you think that's a better comparable?
I'd have to go back and look at the list that Towers Watson gave us.
I may have it here, so give me a moment.
I'll just jump in real quick. That brings up a good point. Are there any peer cities that have a very similar relationship between a nonprofit in partnership with a city entity that is a zoo? Are there any other major zoos across the United States that are very similar to the way we operate this one?
There are a few at this point. The ones that immediately come to mind would be Milwaukee County Zoo. It's county, but it's government owned and operated with a nonprofit support organization. The Minnesota Zoo, Oregon Zoo in Portland. Cleveland Metro Parks.
And were some of those zoos
So those are government owned and operated, and they have separate nonprofits that support them.
But they all do different things.
Yeah.
And they are in different geographic locations.
Right.
Yes, Towers Watson looked at 21 other organizations, including the Autry Museum, the Discovery Science Center of Orange County, the Washington Friends of the National Zoo, Grammy Museum Foundation, Houston Zoo, Library Foundation of Los Angeles, Long Beach Aquarium of the Pacific, the Museum of Natural History here, Los Angeles Opera Company, Los Angeles SPCA, the Museum of Contemporary Art here, the Pacific Symphony, the Pasadena Humane Society, Performing Arts Center of Los Angeles County, San Francisco Zoological Society, Santa Barbara Museum of Art, Santa Barbara Zoological Foundation, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, the Skirball Center, South Coast Repertory, and the Living Desert.
Well, the tricky part, again, the harder the comparable makes it difficult, better for worse, I don't know, is that those organizations don't have a zoo, that's like, you have the executive director of a nonprofit who runs that nonprofit, but then you have, in our case, we have a zoo director as well who runs our zoo, because it's a city agency. So it's a tough one, I grant you.
I think the example of the Smithsonian National Zoo is another good comparable. The Friends of the National Zoo raise money. They also run the concessions there and the education programs. And of course, the Smithsonian's funded by the federal government.
For now.
Yeah.
Can we get a copy of that report, if you don't mind?
I don't know about.
I would have to check with the other members of my committee and Towers Watson, see what our agreement was regarding
As
it.
far as
Also,
the comparative analysis with those institutions that you cited, that would be helpful.
Right.
So, but I will have Connie get back to you on that. I mean, also as an employment lawyer myself, I'm always concerned about protecting employee privacy since we are a private organization. So I'll have to make sure that if there is any identifying information, that it's redacted as well.
I think for nonprofits, all salaries are posted, and there's a website. I can't remember the name of the website, but
For 501c3s?
no, it's another website. So I think most
CharityFinder.com.
I think so, and most nonprofits are all public information for most part. But in any case, if we could get a copy of that, that'd be great.
Certainly, what can be produced, we will provide to you.
And if I may, Mr., I think that's a very fair ask, considering it is a public-private partnership with city resources. I think it's a very fair ask. And, of course, we would respect that you have to redact certain confidential information. That would be a given. But I'll make that part of the request of my recommendation on this item.
Can I ask another quick question?
Of course.
I'm looking at the Gloza budget, and I'm looking at the city's budget, the zoo's budget, I mean. Like the transfers to the LA Zoo, like for commissions, the Zoo Surplus Fund, the Zoo Assistance Fund, all these transfers that you're making to the City of LA, that you're giving to the City of LA. How is that reflected in the zoo's budget? Because I know you're saying for grants, for, for special events, you guys give, after you take out 3% and you take out the salaries, all the profits go to the zoo. Where is that reflected on the zoo's budget statement?
So In the Gloza salaries report, where you see the page that has all of their expenditures, and at the bottom you see source of funds. The portion, so we are getting a portion of the membership revenue. So in 15-16, you see that $6.2 million total at the bottom. So we're getting a portion of that, which is the 25% that we're entitled to. So that's about, $1.5 million.
Right. And I see that here.
Right. So the transfers that we're getting come from the source of funds portion of their budget that you see at the bottom. So the membership revenue, the special events revenue.
Where's the special events revenue? That's the bigger part, because I know special events revenue, contributions and grants and special events total up about, in 14-15, what is that? About close to $6 million. So where is that $6 million reflected in the zoo's budget?
The only portion of that you would see in our budget is the nighttime ticketed event revenue number, which for 15-16 was a little over $1 million. The rest of it stays within Gloza to fund their programs.
Wait, but wasn't it stated earlier that by the Gloza CFO that the special events minus the cost all come to the zoo?
Well, he was speaking to nighttime ticketed events, special events. This special events, 729 is the Beastly Ball.
So the Beastly Ball, we get nothing out of that? So
Not
when you say special events, it's actual tickets only. It's not any extra fundraising. What about grants? We don't get...
It doesn't come directly to our operating budget. A lot of times, if it's for restricted fundraising, it stays within Gloza for whatever the particular purpose might be for education programs, and the expenditures are made out of Gloza accounts. It does not come to our operating budget.
Well, what will be helpful, I guess, in the future is if the two budgets could kind of match up, because in the Gloza budget, it says Zoo Surplus Development Fund and Zoo Assistance Fund. For 14-15, the Zoo Surplus Development Fund was $926 contribution, close to $1 million, and the Zoo Assistance Fund contribution was $300,000. But in your budget, you have Zoo Surplus Fund at $600,000, and
nothing for the Zoo Assistance Fund.
Right.
Correct. Because those funds remain within Gloza that support zoo programs and operations.
And so until such time as you ask for them, is that correct, Denise?
Yes, but they're generally not transferred into the Zoo Enterprise Trust Fund. They stay within Gloza's funds.
So how much is in that fund?
Well, it's sort of like a one-time, Gloza gives us $300,000 in unrestricted funds that they raise on an annual basis that we use to support conservation programs in general.
So how is that reflected in your...
It is not...
we just need to know where, because it's, again, a little confusing.
So
Okay,
Mr.
I'll
Root-
leave it at that.
Yeah, Mr. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make some recommendations. I think that
Got a lot of recommendations.
So I've got I think, and then we're going to get to the next two items.
Right, yeah.
Are we ready to move on to the next two items? No, that's all good. It's all good. This is important. It's important for everyone, I think. So what I'm going to do, colleagues, is one recommended action is note and file the zoo report because for informational purposes, but there is follow-up. Recommendation number one, and I think this synthesizes some of the concerns and ideas that were raised throughout this dialogue that we've just had. So recommendation number one would be have the zoo, LA Zoo, and Gloza to report on the contributions from the relationships identified in the various MOUs and simplify it all by focusing on the last 3 fiscal years. So we're not going back indefinitely. Again, recommend that the LA Zoo and Gloza report on the contributions from the relationships identified in the various MOUs and simplify it all by focusing on the last 3 fiscal years. Add to that the expiration dates of all of the various MOUs that are in play, because they all have different timelines. And then, let's see, provide as a backdrop how all of these MOUs are related to our the existing operating agreement the general operating agreement. That's the several decades-long operating agreement that we're nearing, in the next, I guess, 5 years now. I think that ends in 2022. The context of this is that operating agreement has us locked into certain things. And what we've struggled with since I've been chair of this committee is what we can and cannot do within that operating agreement. And our own CLA and CAO often have different versions of what is allowable and what isn't allowable, as does the zoo and Gloza. So we need to continue getting calibrated on what we can and cannot do vis-a-vis the operating agreement. Does that make sense on this recommendation? Are we good on that? Recommendation number 2 is to request that Gloza provide a comparative analysis report on the public-private partnerships with your peer studies. And of course, we would expect that you would redact all confidential information. But I think it's a very fair and reasonable request, considering what I said earlier. And number 3, I think for clarity, tell us exactly what restricted funding sources are and what unrestricted funding sources are, and the exact events at the zoo in which they are applied. So we know down the list, remove the confusion on restricted sources and unrestricted sources. And those would be my recommendations for item 3. Are we good on those? Okay, terrific. Thank you so much. And then that moves us to item 4, which is, yeah.
Because I was trying to figure it out, and maybe you guys could have it, just the breakdown of administrative fees versus programmatic fees, or costs versus programmatic. Because I see some things here, when I go to Charity Finder, it has a different number, and just to help break that down for us.
Okay, so Bob, let's go ahead and articulate that as the 4th recommendation then. So could you state that again?
To list the Gloza administrative overhead versus programmatic overhead, and versus the zoos, or and the zoos and I guess the Zoo Enterprise Fund is all programmatic. So, yeah, that's it. It's just a little confusing. Maybe you have an answer for that right away.
I don't know what Charity Finder has, but generally, if you're looking at something relative to a website like that, they may be just pulling from us as an independent 501c3 and looking at the administrative funding percentages against all of our types of income. That includes restricted and unrestricted money. So it's I don't exactly know what you're looking at, but it's looking at us. Our cost is a part of our total budget of the programs and funding we are trying to generate. Does that make sense?
It does, and that's why I was sort of giving, rather than relying on what I see at Charity Finder or getting into that too much, because I agree with what I think you're saying, which is it's not necessarily a fair assessment what you see online. So I'm putting it back as a question to you guys so that you can characterize it.
In a way, it's answered
clearly. For us, and maybe it is.
But we'll talk about it next time.
Okay, terrific. So let's make that recommendation for Gloza to work with the LA Zoo on administrative overhead and programmatic overhead for complete accuracy as it relates to what's publicly noticed in the public domain, because that can be very, very corrosive for obvious reasons if inaccurate numbers are out there in the public domain. It's an opportunity for us to remove that.
I haven't looked at what you're looking at, but my personal thought is some of the confusion here is trying to put two different organizations together, and respectfully, you all look at it from a city revenue side, and I look at it from the nonprofit, our budget side, and I think when we're all trying to put it all together, that's where it becomes confusing, and the MOUs do not help make it simple to understand.
I don't disagree with you at all, Ms. Morgan, but we have a very sacred fiduciary responsibility to taxpayers. I mean, it's just the way it is, and we have to. It's our jobs actually to clarify that, as inconvenient and as work intensive as it might be. But when we get to the bottom of all of this and we demystify the relationship and the funding therein, then it certainly serves the greater good, and that's what we all are trying to get to.
We're committed to helping get there.
Great.
That is our dream, is
Thank you.
to get this sorted out so we all.
I'm confident that we can. I mean, we've been at this for 3.5 years, and I'm confident we can get there. So that shall be the order for the instructions on item 3, which moves us to item 4, accessibility of the Los Angeles Zoo and minimizing barriers to the people visiting the zoo. Please, we present, or we can go right into the questions, whatever you think.
You can go right to the questions if you haven't. I don't necessarily need to present.
So this really came up 3 years ago. We had the big joint hearing in January of 2014 when we started kind of peeling away the layers of the onion to figure this out. There was new leadership on the city council, new energy, and we stepped into some very mysterious situations as it relates to the relationship with the marketing and et cetera. And we've all been part of this journey together. So I want to start with LEOSD and school groups and your partnerships with educational facilities and organizations on visits, zoo visits. I mean, I've myself gone in person and greeted elementary students from my schools because you have these events. So could you elaborate on that and if there's an approved curriculum related to that relationship?
Yes. So we have a total of 137,000 students and adult chaperones that came to the zoo last fiscal year as part of school group visits. The zoo is free to schools in the LAUSD if you come on a school field trip. And if you are a non-LAUSD school group, you pay $3 per student and $5 for the adult chaperone. Head Start programs are free as well. And so you can schedule a visit. You can get a docent-guided tour, or you can do a self-guided tour. And generally, the barrier that we see for school groups is really the cost for transportation, because obviously it's not that expensive, but buses are very, very expensive. And so Gloza has a very successful scholarship program where they raise funds that we administer through our education program to bring underserved schools into the zoo, which is one of the schools that you actually came and were able to visit with when they came to the zoo, to allow them to come to visit the zoo. They don't have to pay admissions, and their transportation is provided. So last fiscal year, 137,000 students and chaperones came to the zoo, and we provided scholarships to over 5,000 children and 800 adults. And of that amount, nearly 5,000 were within the city of Los Angeles that received the Zoo Pal scholarship.
Right. Two things on that is, number one, city council offices can sponsor bus trips for school kids, which is what we do. So everyone probably already knows that, and it's a great way to augment the costs to the zoo. And second of all, do you itemize as an in-kind donation for the 137,000 school visits so that it's reflected in your budget? For example, if every school kid paid the fee to get into the zoo, that would be additional revenue. Love the program, want to actually grow it if we can, but just to tell the story of, we subsidize free visits for 137,000 kids. That's very significant, and that's part of a winning narrative that should be told.
Is that a number greatly increased over last year or last several years, or is that about on par with what's happened in the past?
It actually has been going down sort of year after year, believe it or not. And part of that has to do with we don't have a formal school program. So lots of organizations like ourselves and certainly other zoos and aquariums actually have like a school group program. And these days, teachers have to connect a field trip visit with, the science-based curriculum in the classroom, which has been evolving over the last few years. And so we don't have a formal program that makes it easy for them to correlate a school visit to the zoo, with curriculum and pre and post and evaluative measures. So we actually asked for a new position in the proposed budget for a new curator of education that would be specifically dedicated to a school program. We used to have a position. It was deleted many years ago, but we think that that's actually would facilitate an increase, and we're actually doing a needs assessment right now, going out and talking to teachers across the city to find out what would encourage them to plan a school visit as part of a field trip, just so that we can see what we can do to increase these numbers, because we agree that they should be higher. You're welcome.
Sure.
And to go back to your question
Yes.
about the budget, it's not reflected in our budget, but these numbers are reported on the mayor's metric section. So we report them every month to the mayor's office in the city metrics.
Okay. So you have a pretty good number of total attendance, and then the percentage of that attendance that's subsidized.
Yes, the school groups are subsidized.
Okay, and then in terms of the zoo outreach program managed by Gloza, can you tell us a little bit about how the marketing plan or the outreach program outreaches to disadvantaged communities that where English isn't the first language, or in census tracts that are very, very low income, what the relationship is with the Gloza marketing plan vis-a-vis the zoo?
I'm not exactly sure that the outreach program is connected to the marketing program per se, but it is a program that's managed by Gloza's docents and volunteers, and they do go out into the community, underserved communities, and provide, experiences with outreach animals and biofacts, and are teaching education and conservation messages to both adults and to children. They served over 10,000 people total last fiscal year. It's a very successful program. I don't believe it's connected necessarily, though, to the marketing program. It's just their outreach program that they've been doing for a very long time.
And I would offer that philanthropists and donors and supporters of the zoo who have the resources, if they knew that Gloza was in partnership, their marketing plan in partnership with the zoo, to outreach to these traditionally disadvantaged communities, it would be a real winner in terms of driving in donations, to driving in additional revenues to support zoo operations.
I need to clarify, and Connie, you can correct me if I'm
Sure.
wrong, but this program is mostly aimed at people that cannot come to the zoo, but elderly that are in homes, people that are hospital bound, those type of communities, not necessarily maybe a underserved school, et cetera. And the way they do the program, you're talking about, I'm not disagreeing with your point, I'm just trying to share that to ramp up the support that's needed at the zoo, i.e. additional ambassador animals, the staff to take care of them. It's more than just finding ways to get to those locations.
Okay. Colleagues?
Great program, and I concur with your suggestion. We should try to help monetize it for yourself to show exactly how much value in dollars we're giving to the city of LA.
Just to clarify, all the funding for these programs and the zoo scholarship programs, that's all coming not out of the Zoo Enterprise Fund, but out of the Gloza.
Fundraising.
Restricted fundraising.
Well, fundraising and also, is it also coming out of those other sources of funding too, the membership dollars and those kinds of things?
Scholarship programs to bring the kids to the zoo, and scholarships for zoo camp are all raised funds by Gloza specific to those needs. to private donors.
So like when my kids went to zoo camp, which they enjoyed very much, and it was great, we paid the full price, and of course.
We appreciate that.
But other children didn't.
And so some of that money would go to those scholarships, or it's a separate
It's a separate
thing
fund.
altogether?
It's a separate fund that we raise separately in order to give the zoo the money to attract, and the zoo does the process for finding the children who will participate tuition-free. But
With the zoo
raise
camp,
the
it's
fund.
about 12% of the attendance that's actually supported by scholarship.
Your money, though, supports our operating budget, so we appreciate it.
All right.
All right, so we have two more items after this, and so I have some recommendations on this, and we'll move to item 5. So note and file the report from November of 2017, but instruct the zoo department and Gloza to report back on all outreach activities and programs meant to increase attendance across all council districts. Some more challenging than others, right? All the way down in San Pedro and all the way in the North Valley. But I think we have opportunities. Without objection, that's what we'll do.
Sounds good.
And that takes us to item 5, which is the zoo's marketing program, which a lot of this discussion overlapped with earlier discussions, but I do have some questions. But would you like to talk about the marketing program or give a quick update or overview, or should we go into
If it's okay with
a few
Connie, we'll
questions?
invite Kate Hilliard to the table, who oversees
Yes.
the marketing program, and let her
Absolutely
answer your
welcome.
questions and report.
Hello.
Please.
So I think this report that you're referring to is the biannual report.
Yes.
From last year. Obviously, we've continued to move forward, making additional plans in the meantime. So I guess I would just welcome your questions relevant to this report, so I don't stray too far afield.
Okay. All right, sure. So the report mentions that geographic outreach utilizes digital bloggers to promote the zoo beyond a 30-mile radius, which supplements the paid advertisements and the marketing. So my question is, what is the focus audience of these bloggers? Travelers, entertainment, children, families, subcategories of demographics, other languages?
Yeah, so I would say they are primarily, the bloggers themselves are women with families with small children, and they range from English-speaking, Spanish-speaking. We have also some Asian language folks. And their intent is to share fun things to do, and this fun and educational things to do within the city of Los Angeles with your children. So that's the primary audience for them, and that is our core audience as well. And we do from time to time have a travel blogger that will want to come and participate.
And do you have any way to measure the success or people outreach to or people who have heard? Is there a way to get some data on that?
Yeah, so we do, we can monitor what they actually post about us over the course of the year or a particular event in relation to them. That we have the ability to monitor their traffic, and we do ask for our events when we do post-event surveys, where did you hear about this? And bloggers would be one of the options.
So you can have a sense on how successful the program is. What's the cost of this?
Zero.
Zero, okay.
Yeah.
So it's a great free way to promote the zoo and support for the zoo.
Right.
Okay. And then, speaking of the biennial report, when can we expect to take a look at and discuss the metrics of that?
Well, the biennial report was submitted by the zoo
Last Friday.
Okay, that's the one we were talking about earlier. Yeah.
The metrics are good.
Okay, great. And so we know that we have a deadline approaching at the end of this fiscal year. So we'll take a look at that, and we'll get it calendared and take a good look at what that says. All right, colleagues, questions about the zoo marketing program?
I'm just anxious to also see see how you measure the results. I mean, I'm glad that you're doing the outreach. I think the digital approach is is certainly healthy. Did I see something here about ads in the ethnic press or stories in the ethnic press?
Right. So we continue to do outreach to a broad spectrum of media for all of our media events. We focus mostly on things you can do at the zoo. So for instance, we have upcoming a draft media event, and there's a very extensive list that includes all the different audiences that we're trying to reach.
I just invite you to, there are a couple of African-American journals,
Mhm.
newspapers, they're not listed
Yeah.
here, but I don't know if you're doing the outreach to them. The Sentinel, The Wave, some of the usual
Mhm.
publications, I think, would also.
Yeah, and I've had conversations with them over the years as well. So,
It's always good to have that conversation again. New people
Yeah.
come in, and, you know, you kind of have to start over again sometimes.
Great point.
Yep.
Just quickly, it seems like you're doing well in all sectors except for maybe the Hispanic Latino community, or it's a little underserved. So if you could focus a little bit more on that. And with over $2 million invested annually in the marketing and public relations program, the goals that you set forth in the biannual report, or the goals that you hit so far, so how does that compare to the city's goals, if we have any, the zoo's expectations, as well as comparisons to other zoos? Are we, the 5% increase in paid attendance, 11% total admissions? I mean, how does it compare to others and our own expectations?
Well, I think the goals were developed in concert with the zoo department, so those are in alignment, and that's what we report to on a regular basis, how we're doing to those goals. And then as far as other institutions, it varies widely, depending on if there's a new exhibit opened, if we've had any extreme weather events, those kinds of things. So I would say that I do sit on the marketing committee for the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and do have a pretty good sense of how other zoos are performing. I'd be happy to, provide any data that we have available, but I would say that we're doing well in the industry as a whole.
That'll be good to know. And again, when we get the revised numbers and revised different budget forms, it'll probably explain it better. But on your biannual report, you've said you've generated a total of more than $6 million of new funding for the zoo. That's you meant for Gloza and the zoo, right? Because it's only 3.5 for the zoo.
I think it's over the period of time. It's 3 years.
It's
not,
over 3
not
years.
specific to 1 year.
Okay.
That's a 3-year goal. And I know sorry.
No, go ahead.
Councilmember Price asked a question about how we measure our success. And I'd just like to say that we do our surveys. Of course, our biggest measurement of success is if we're hitting our financial goals. Have we attracted the number of people that we've set for ourselves, and have we met the financial goals? As well, we do track on all of our media campaigns. The easiest one to track directly is digital, because we can measure traffic to the website. We can even measure behavior through to completion of a purchase. So we know how those campaigns are performing, and when they're running, we can optimize them quickly, like within 2 weeks. So we don't just put something out there and forget about it. We are very diligent and want to make the most of our expenditures, because we want to exceed our goals. That's always our standard.
Terrific. Mr. Blumenfield.
Yeah, help me understand. Last time we were talking about when we were talking about extending the MOU, and we were looking at the marketing numbers, the attendance was down.
Or flat, I believe.
It was flat, but it had showed that we weren't hitting the marks on where we were, what our intentions were.
Correct.
And I'm looking at this, and it's saying that the attendance numbers are up. So what am I missing?
Well, I think there's 2 parts to your question. One is, if we're looking backward to when this report was filed and the time period that it covers, I think that we had not, let me find that.
We had not yet completed the year.
Right, we had not yet completed the year. Now, the other part of it is the difference between daytime, exclusively daytime paid admission, and daytime and nighttime together. So when taken together, we were meeting the goal.
Well, also, when you do look at the next biannual report, you will see that daytime admissions climbed very well during the final year. During 15-16, the daytime admissions climbed to a great amount. So I think you'll begin to see a significant difference with that final year when you receive the
So it was just
report.
about the time, so what was that, and forgive me because I don't remember, there's a lot going on. What was that previous report that showed the decline, and how does that fit in? Because this is going back to year 2013.
I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, the last time we spoke, it was about the conclusion of the 14-15 year, where there wasn't the,
But it had been flat for a couple of years
No.
on that.
It was flat for daytime attendance and climbing because of the addition of nighttime attendance. But with the final year of the MOU in 15-16, the daytime admissions grew from 723,000 in 14-15 to 790,000 in 15-16. And so that was the year, and I know we will discuss this at a later time, but it seemed that it did take the 3 years to get the admissions moving in the right direction.
So if I may, Councilman, I think what you're referring to is the fact that we weren't hitting the targets that were in the agreement. And you made the good point of, why'd you set those targets if
Yes.
they're not achievable? And when you see this next report, it's going to show you all the years, and it shows you exactly what is achieved each year. And some years we didn't meet the mark, other years we met or exceeded the mark. So it's given us a lot more information on how we go forward with this type of an agreement.
So would you say we're meeting and exceeding the mark according to?
For the final year.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying in some years we met the marks, and some years we didn't.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
It's not in that report, but in the report that's on its way to you is what we've seen.
Okay, because I'm trying to square the two reports, looking, because they both are saying admissions and revenue, but maybe it's a different baseline because you're talking about the MOU baseline versus the actual baseline. You could see why I might be getting turned around on this. Any way to help me understand that better?
Which numbers are you referring to, Councilman? I'm sorry.
We had the marketing, the MOU marketing, which when last time we were talking about this, we were concerned because we were not meeting the mark. And now I'm looking at on page 2 and 3 of this report, looking at the attendance and seeing that it's going up. It's gone up every year since 2012. The 2012 baseline was 1.5 million. Then
You're looking at
Which
You're looking
report?
at the report that just got sent to you, which isn't on the, is that, what's the date
no, I'm
on that
looking at
report?
the biannual report to City Council regarding the MOU. Is that what just got sent to?
What's the
This
date
page?
on it?
February 2nd.
All right, so I'm looking at something different. What is that? Okay, so I'm not looking at the right thing. Okay, so I'm looking at something, I guess, that had just arrived on February 2nd.
Right.
Correct.
But it has not yet been agendized for this committee.
Right. And nor do we have, was the full report sent Friday or just this summary?
The full report was sent on Friday. It was uploaded, and it's several pages long.
Yeah, okay. So we'll definitely get that agendized in a near future meeting as far as a full presentation on the biannual.
But it's
working plan.
in the council file, so we can speak
Yeah.
to it if you want to. There's nothing prohibiting us from speaking.
No, not at all.
Okay, well, so.
But I don't want to catch anybody off guard. That's
No,
not
I have it here with me,
I
so
do too.
I'm happy to talk about it.
We thought we were talking about the other report, that's why we were.
I had them linked for some reason, so I was looking at all the numbers together. But
So if I may, I think one of the confusing parts is we have paid attendance, and then we have nighttime attendance, and then we have free attendance, which all rolls up to the total attendance. And each one tells a little bit different story, and I think that's what you were looking at the last time we met, was the paid attendance really was essentially flat. There was maybe almost 2,000 more in daytime paid attendance between 13-14 and 14-15.
Right, and so what you're saying, so what's actually happening on the ground, the paid attendance is still flat, or it's?
No, paid attendance has now, in 15-16, went up 7.7%. So it went from 723,912 to 790,160. And that is on that page 2, under number 4.
Number 4, okay.
Mm-hmm.
The paid groups, daytime admissions.
Mm-hmm.
Baseline was 817 in 2012, then 822, then 826, then 890. Is that what you're looking at?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So it went from, so the first year was 1%, 0%, and then this year is, or last year was 7.7%.
Correct.
Increase.
And that's why John said in some years we didn't make the mark, in some years we did.
Right. And then if you look in the chart just below that, where the nighttime attendance is included, that's where there was a lot of growth in that middle year, was through nighttime attendance.
Right. And so what do you attribute the increase in attendance, the 7.7%, to?
Well, I'm going to take all the credit. No. Marketing. Marketing. No. I think we made some adjustments. We had some really good learnings the first 2 years in some of our daytime programming, which is also handled through marketing. So in the past, for instance, our Boo at the Zoo event had been a one-weekend event, and then we increased, in the second year, we increased it to 2 weekends. We decided to go and do it all month long, change the focus from trick-or-treating to being a little bit more educational and mission-focused, and we marketed that month long and saw a really significant increase in attendance. And part of that strategy was, in the past, we'd had many weekend events that we invested money in the programming and we invested money in the marketing, and if we had a 110-degree day or we had a rainy day or weekend, that entire effort was meaningless. And by shifting our focus to month-long events and marketing those, we had time for the marketing to gain awareness in the marketplace. People then drove attendance over a longer period of time and higher attendance. So we did see increase in paid attendance for Boo at the Zoo, for Reindeer Romp, and for our Wild for the Planet month-long event in the spring.
And then I guess last thing I'll bring up, on the last page, you say that the challenge of this report that we're looking at, the challenges include the ability to drive and increase paid daytime attendance and admissions revenue, and to establish a pricing model that optimizes the balance between paid and member attendance. Which I think is always, that's partly where all the confusion comes in, is that figuring out that balance and not cannibalizing one for the other and understanding the importance of both. But is there anything specific about those challenges that you wanted to add?
We thought we had an answer with the return rate, but when you add in sales incentives to sell the memberships and discounts, as well as people taking advantage of their past memberships, it kind of whittles that down. So we're still trying to figure out what is that rollover rate. In other words, if I buy a membership, what's the equivalent of paying at the gate? The national average is somewhere around two times, and we settled in on 1.9 thinking that would do it, but it didn't seem to have that much of an impact. Right now, the interesting thing is going to be is that the membership rate is more closely related to our gate price, which has caused it to go up, and I think you lost some memberships as a result of that. So I think we're still struggling with that balance, council member.
Okay. Thank you.
Quick question. How was Zoo Lights this year, and is it reflected in the biannual report?
No.
I didn't think so because it's so soon. But what was it like year over year, just anecdotally even?
Well, this year, we saw a great uptick in attendance and purchases.
So that should be reflected in the
In the
revenue.
next report, it went from 170,000 tickets last year to 214,000 this year at a higher price point. So the overall nighttime admissions money will become ever more important to the overall bottom line of the zoo admissions.
It seems
revenue.
like the hottest ticket in town, right? I
We're
mean,
very proud of it,
Yeah.
and we will continue to try to improve the product and ensure that more people come.
all right. So colleagues, what I'm going to note and file the report from November 17th, and then we will schedule the biannual report, marketing report, soon. We want to make sure that we can satisfy the requirements of the June 30th deadline. So thank you for that. That brings us to item 6, which is the concessions program, the MOU between the zoo and Gloza. Should we go into just questions on this one?
I think so. Let me make just a couple of comments, because I think
Absolutely.
it'll help clarify, hopefully, the questions. So you have the report that we received from Gloza on their progress so far on the RFPs and reviewing how they're going to go forward with concessions. As you can see in my cover letter, that their consultant had recommended that a 15-year agreement would be beneficial to Gloza as far as getting the best deal in the RFP. Gloza has recommended that we make this term of the concessions agreement 18 years, and that's to allow a little buffer on both sides to release the RFP, but then also at the end of the RFP to prepare for the next contractor. Gloza, as I said, they're working on this RFP. The zoo has not seen it yet because they have a draft that's being reviewed by their legal counsel at this point, after which they're going to bring it to the city partners to go through and review, including the CLA and the CO, and probably Rec and Parks or another city department to give us the benefit of their experience. And at that point, we'll all be able to see more of what's in there relative to the RFP. I did get one question, and I will just reemphasize, Gloza is aware of the request from Councilman Courts about the food purchasing and the good food program. So they are addressing that in the RFP. And with that, Connie, unless you have something else to add.
No?
Okay, be happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. So the research findings from the consultant, has it been shared with city staff yet, and especially the CEO and CLA?
Not yet. I mean, we have finished the draft, and you want some more work done on it before we do that, but it will be coming shortly.
Okay.
And
So,
I mean, it's our full intent to follow exactly the procedure you asked us
Okay.
to do.
terrific.
And
So
we are working toward that, but did not want to bring something to you that we did not
Half-baked.
feel was good enough.
understood. So do you think we might be able to have the draft to share with our departments in 4 weeks, or is that something like that reasonable?
Hugh, at what time frame?
Yeah, probably 4 to 8 weeks, we will have a final draft.
Okay.
That we will be able to form a committee with and share it with everybody in the city and the zoo, and put a committee together and have everybody be able to make whatever changes or comments they want.
Great. And colleagues, part of the issue has always been CLA and CAO kind of on different pages. So the effort is to, get everyone on the same page with a way forward on the concessionaires and the contracts, et cetera. So I look very forward to that. And then the joint report provides an estimate that an RFP process takes roughly 12 to 18 months. The Zoo Department of Gloza's status report has it about 9 to 12 months for a final RFP to be completed. What do you attribute to that discrepancy? And if the CEO, if Terry Sauer, you're welcome to come and add your 2 cents to that.
Terry Sauer, CAO's office. Mr. Chair, what we had included in our report was the timeline from the time at which we reported to you. If Gloza is reporting 9 to 12 months, we assume without knowing specifically, we would assume that that's within the time frame of the 12 to 18 months that we had laid out. That was what had been reported back to us. And so at the time at which we forwarded the report to you, we were looking at a 12 to 18 month timeline from that specific time when the report came back the last time this was in committee.
Okay.
I
So,
ca-
And we can modify our estimate. We're totally in agreement.
yeah, so you're,
I think it's 12 to 18 months.
yeah, I just want to make sure everyone was on
Yeah.
the same page with the timeframes.
Yeah, I mean, our estimate is when we came to you, we assumed it was a 12 to 18 month period, but that would take into account the work that's already been done, and presumably they're on that same schedule.
Sounds like we're on track for that. Okay, great. And then what's the general scope of work for the hired consultant? Is it everything that we kind of laid out in the RFP?
We have not seen any of the work
That's
from
right.
the hired consultants, so I cannot comment on that.
So maybe Gloza can comment, but maybe you can't, especially if you haven't submitted the draft yet.
The scope of work of the consultant?
Yeah.
The scope of work of the consultant was to work with Gloza.
Come to the
Oh, yeah,
microphone.
sorry.
We need to hear you on.
You need to be on the record, that's all.
Yeah.
The scope of work of the consultant was to assist Gloza in putting together the RFP in the proper format and according to the criteria that you had set in your authorization to us. We're almost finished with it and ahead of schedule, and all it needs to do is go through our legal process and make sure that we're all in conformance with everything that we're doing.
Okay. I gather that you're secure that the stated milestones have been reached and you're about ready to move it forward. based
We are.
on the- yeah.
We are,
okay.
and we're excited about it.
Okay. All right. Terrific. Thank you. Colleagues, Mr. Rue.
My staff tells me it's been done before, so it's not uncommon, but how common is it that we have the person who's going to apply for the RFP come up with the RFP or do the initial draft of the RFP? Maybe this is a CLA or a CAO question. How common is it?
That's a good question, sir. We put out a number of different RFPs for the city, use different experts. I'd have to really look at the research and get back to you with an answer on that.
So I just express a little bit of concern because, as my staff told me, it's been done before in the city of LA, so it's not highly unusual. But at the same time, our CAO and our CLA has nothing to review at this point, and with all the questions that we have and lots of confusions, when the draft does come back, I really would want CAO and CLA as well as the zoo to highly scrutinize to make sure and compare with other RFPs. And again, this is a unique arrangement that I know of in the nation, so it'll be harder to have a direct correlation comparison. But if we could really look into that, the RFP, and also look into why I'd like to know why we're not doing it. Yeah. And the second question I have is, and I guess that's an open-ended question that they could answer later. Or you know what, CAO, CLA, do you know why we're not doing the RFP? What's the history of it? How come? Or preparing the RFP?
I can answer that a little bit as well.
Oh.
But Terry, please take a seat. Yeah.
Right.
Standing room only. But Terry, please, and I can augment if necessary. Yeah.
Councilmember, what currently is in place with the city is the operating agreement between the city and Gloza. There's also the concessions agreement, and as a consequence of this concessions agreement, that allows Gloza to operate the concessions through the use of a third party. So Gloza holds the contract for the third party, which at this point is Centerplate. So by having Gloza issue the RFP, so that's how Gloza is responsible for the concessions, but the city did authorize them. At some point, Gloza did, at one point prior to the concessions, and I don't remember the dates. Gloza did operate the concessions in-house. With the change to the current operating agreement and the concessions agreement, at that point, Gloza utilized a third party.
So basically, we're subbing the contract to Gloza, and they're subbing it back to another
Correct.
contractor. So
Correct. But having the zoo operate concessions in-house and hold the contract themselves is always an option, and that has been discussed in the past.
I think it was probably a year ago, we had close discussions with the zoos, Gloza, CLA, CAO. We actually imposed the oversight that didn't exist before on the awarding of the concessionaires. That's why it'll be submitted for review by the CAO and CLA, which wasn't the practice before. So that's something that we've kind of instituted as a committee.
thank you. And I know the chairman and Councilman Blumenfield has been working on these issues for multiple years, so I really value your institutional knowledge and leadership on this. One more question. So in the report, it says 15 years. You want the concession agreement to be 15 or 18 because you want the buffer, but 15 because that allows for the greatest amount of optimization, especially with advanced capital improvement funds. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? To explain why 15?
Would you like to come back to the table with you?
Sure.
Here,
We asked our concessionaire to survey other zoos and other entities and other experiences that he's had, and found that just as we thought, that the longer that you let a contract to a concessionaire or vendor, the more money that they will give you up front as capital improvement money.
You went to our consultant, not our concessionaire.
Our consultant. And I spoke with other zoos as well in the zoo CFO organization. They confirmed that. We hope to get as much money as possible as a contribution towards rebuilding the concessions that we have, in addition to higher commissions.
So CO or CLA, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison, but like our the Hollywood Bowl concession contract or some of the other venues, Greek Theater, now we're managing it ourselves, but how long were those contracts, concession contracts, on average?
There is an industry standard, isn't there?
The Hollywood Bowl contract, I think, is 10 years, if I remember correctly. We are using the same consultant that did that as well for the city.
So,
for the county.
I think, and I would love the CAO and the CLA to look at the RFP when it comes in, but definitely we want to respect the industry standard as well as trying to get as much upfront capital improvements as possible. But we want to look at the inclusive package, make sure we have the maximum. Well, I guess we can't tell you, but I think maximum flexibility would be ideal. So, I would love our CLA and CAO to give us an independent analysis about if 15 years is the optimum way to go, or whether it should be shorter or even longer. So, and I don't want to just base it on upfront capital. So,
understood.
Those are good points, Mr. Rue. Yeah, and I think that Rec and Parks isn't here, but we enter into RFPs for concessions all the time. They vary. I know that we just entered into a 5-year with a restaurant operator at Echo Park Lake. So it would be good to get a sense of what the standard is for concessionaires in general, the contracts the city enters into, and we'll have that conversation.
Right, and measurements of success. How do we measure success? So could you do that in 5 plus 5 plus 5, and with benchmarks?
Mr. Blumenfield.
And along the same lines, just of what happens if we are dissatisfied? 18 years is a long time. What happens if we're dissatisfied after 5 years? What are our outs? Do they have to be for cause based on certain criteria, or how does that work with the proposed concession agreement?
You're speaking of the concessions agreement with Gloza, or the Gloza concessions agreement?
The Gloza concessions agreement with concessionaire. We're talking about giving an 18-year. Well, I guess no. The 18 years for us to manage with Gloza, not necessarily the Gloza So how long with each of those concessionaires are we talking about?
We're talking a total of 15 years, with it being a 10-year agreement initially, with our option to extend for another 5 years if they pay us the money that they bid in the contract.
But there are.
The terms that we're starting off with in the RFP is that we can terminate the concessionaire for any reason at all, at any time, with 60 days' notice if we're dissatisfied with their service. In return for that, we would have to pay them back the money that is unamortized that they have advanced us. And that's the only penalty to us. So, for example, if they gave us $10 million for 10 years, they were 3 years in it and we were dissatisfied, we could say goodbye if we didn't like what was happening, but we would owe them the $7 million that was remaining.
And it's amortized evenly over the course of the...
If it turns out that way, that's what we're going to start off with. At least that's what Gloza is going to be suggesting.
Right. Okay, and what about outs between the cities? So that gives me a lot more assurances on that end.
Absolutely, and in addition, we'll have full control over pricing, the products on the menu, the people that are working there, all of that. This is our facility, and we want to have full say in all of those things.
Okay.
I'm not sure that who will accept those terms, but that's what we're starting off with.
That's what you're starting off with. So that's the Gloza to the contractor. What
Correct.
about the city to Gloza?
In the concessions agreement, you have an out.
Yeah, there's a termination clause in the operating agreement that speaks to our ability to terminate the concessions agreement. I believe it's with 60 days' notice, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but there's termination language in the operating agreement.
There's got to be some sort of penalty as well, right? Otherwise, the years are meaningless.
Not to the city, not based on the language that's in the agreement right now.
I think the reasonable way would be that as long as you assume the contract that Gloza has with the concessionaire, if you didn't want Gloza to be here, then your choice. We wouldn't have any investment that you would have to pay back.
And then Gloza gets a management
Same
fee.
3%.
3%. And then the last paragraph, there's something about, the new master plan. I know we're involved, there's a new master plan potentially that could involve all aspects of the zoo, including concessions. So, and as noted on one of the reports, saying it's an interesting question in terms of the timing of the RFP and the master plan. Does that raise any problems in terms of the timing of the master plan? Should the master plan be completed before the concession agreement? What are the pros and cons and the issues of timing?
Well, I think you're expressing some of Hugh's concerns exactly, almost how those two should mesh, and whether it's dominoes or whether they should be parallel or one in front of the other. And my answer at this point is we're early into the development of the plan. I think this is a fairly high-level plan as to where, for example, a concessions facility might be versus what it looks like or how it's designed. So let's get a little bit more from the plan. And then as we come back to you, particularly towards the end of this fiscal year, I think we'll have an answer for that. But it's an important question which should come first.
Okay, I'm going to just bring up one point. We have Ms. Law from the Food Policy Council who made a remark earlier. And this committee has been on record from the very beginning about good, healthy food, purchasing and options for people visiting public facilities. We've incorporated a lot of that with our recreation parks facilities. Mr. Kretz, who sits on this committee, did request that a good food pledge be included in the concessions contract as per what I just mentioned. Is there a reason it wasn't mentioned? Where is it? How can we still incorporate this value into Our concessionaire.
Absolutely.
Is it okay?
All of your requirements are included in the draft RFP.
Including the good food pledge?
Absolutely.
Okay, somehow I missed it, but
The
it's in
answer
here.
is yes.
Terrific. Okay, great, thank you.
I just had a quick follow-up to Councilman Blumenfield, and he brought up a point that I didn't think about. Can CAO and CLO make sure that if Gloza's contract with the potential concessionaire is 10 years, 10 plus 5, but we're at 18, maybe we I don't know, weigh cost-benefit analysis of maybe we should be at 10 plus 5 as well to sync up. And also, if you said we have a 60-day termination clause, but if we could clarify with the city attorney or CLA and CAO exactly what our penalty is, because we technically don't have a penalty with Gloza, but then who assumes the penalty? Because if Gloza is happy with the concessionaire, but we're not happy with the concessionaire, and we decide to sever contract, I mean, who is stuck with the bill? So that's something to carefully look at as well. And if, I mean, it is our zoo facility at the end of the day, so it seems like Gloza has a lot of control over the actual food, the employees, and all of that. What is I mean, are we just giving a blanketed 18-year contract? Or, so, I mean, it'd be great to make sure because it's not just, because we have to be careful with our relationship, I mean, our contract with Gloza, but also what Gloza is with the concessionaire. So if we could get an analysis on that.
Yes, sir. I mean, the original joint report that you adopted last year includes that framework for CLA and CAO to work with the zoo and Gloza. That question will be asked in that. And so once we receive the draft of the RFP, we can begin that analysis and inform the committee as requested.
And all of this before a contract is awarded?
Of course. There's nothing proposed so far.
That's the important thing. And so, Mr. I'll also, in my recommended action, I think we can address this too. Colleagues?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'd like to recommend is, I think we've probably already note and filed the November report. I keep saying that. Yeah. But further, instruct the Zoo Department in Gloza to deliver a draft RFP and scope of work for the hired consultant to the City Administrative Officer and the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst by next month, which is in conjunction with the next concessions status report deadline anyway. 2, instruct the Zoo Department in Gloza to provide a current copy of the scope of work that governs the hired consultant's work to City Administrative Officer and the CLA by March of 2017 also, again in conjunction with the next concessions status report deadline. And then lastly, instruct the CAO, with the assistance of the CLA, to report on the proposed concession RFP in 90 days, time frame in conformance with previous council instructions.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
I don't think that those the requirements are fine. We'll be glad to submit all those things, but I don't think we'll be ready by March.
Okay. The most important thing is that we are ready to deliberate, scrutinize, and take action before the June 30th deadline. That's the important.
August 30th.
April? Do you think April or?
I believe that it was August.
Well, you said you needed 4 to 8 weeks to get this finalized to get to our city.
So let's give it 8 weeks then. Is that doable? That gets us into April.
It has to be the time for the attorney to go and review all of that.
Right. Is 4 to 8 weeks enough?
I think 8 weeks would be fine.
So we'll schedule something at least 8 weeks from now, perhaps
sure.
late April, because that gets us in. I mean, we're going to be.
If we look at April 15th, mid-April.
Yeah, that gets us into the city budget. It's going to be intense. There's a lot that we're going to be dealing with, right? Terry, shake your head. Sure. So we're.
Do budget right after.
Yeah. So I think we can get there then in time to, get this in order for the awarding the next contracts, right? Okay, I know it's kind of aggressive, but I think we can do it. So that shall be the order then, unless, yes, Mr. Rue.
Oh, well, I mean, before you make closing comments, if I could just make a few comments. I mean, I just want to really first thank John and Connie and all your staff for your reports. I mean, it's been very, very informative. And obviously, proud to represent the 4th, and I say that because it includes the city's iconic zoo. And, you know, the zoo is a place, it has a place in our heart where it's the most vibrant area in the city of LA, and it's a fantastic campus for Angelinos and visitors to enjoy. And I have my first memories as a child at the zoo. I think it was free back then, I don't know. But, I mean, I want to be clear, I want the zoo to be successful. And it's iconic. I mean, it should be childhood memories for all children in Los Angeles, not just myself. However, you know, some of the reports and some of the numbers are concerning, and you know, my biggest concern is transparency, and I believe the city council deserves more information for the analysis of the performance of the zoo and a clear plan for success. And you know, it's pretty clear that besides some of the lack of timely or consistent reporting or information sharing, there's some confusion by both the zoo and Gloza budgets, MOUs, and all of that. And I think the chair thoroughly gave multiple follow-ups. So I really want to thank the chair, and I know the chair and Councilman Blumenfield has been working on this issue years before I even got on council. And but you know, it looks like basically the zoo's relationship with Gloza, you know, just for a base figure is about $3.5 million in support. And I say this because, you know, we face something similar in my district as well. 2 years ago, and it was just before I got in council as well, the city was grappling with how to manage the Greek theater. And at the time, the city was looking to maximize revenues, operating efficiencies, and community benefits at the theater. And the CAO, the CLA, and the city attorney did a tremendous amount of work to determine the best operating solution going forward. So I'd really like to see an in-depth analysis to figure out how to best move forward with the zoo. And I hate to rehash the old, all the items from 2 to 6, but I think it was inferred, but I just want to confirm that, you know, that everything that we just requested, obviously the CAO and the CLA extensively reviews, because I know everything till now is from the zoo and Gloza. So I don't know if you guys want to analyze the reports that come in, or if you want to do your own independent analysis, but I look to the chair for recommendation, but I want to make sure that it's not just from Gloza and the zoo.
Mr. Rue, that oversight is now baked in.
Okay.
It wasn't previously, but it is now baked into every process.
Great.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make clear on that. No. Okay. So, and we look forward to continued success in the zoo. I think you guys made a lot happen with zero general fund contribution. Additional general fund contribution, and we look forward to continued success at the zoo. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I make a couple comments? First of all, and I should have made this earlier, but we cannot overlook that part of this relationship is the fact that Gloza is doing operational things that, you know, support the zoo, not just what, let me back up. Gloza is doing operational things. And if they weren't doing those things, then the zoo either would have to pick it up or we wouldn't have it. So I understand the point about the $3 million, but literally every dollar that Gloza spends is for the zoo. And so whether it's publications or volunteers or special events or the concession, that all makes the total of the zoo. So to your point about the budgets melding better, that's important to show that combined impact. And then I guess I do have a question, sir, about how we go forward with the MOUs that we submitted, because we need those. And maybe you don't have an answer now, but I'll just bring it up that they're still out there, the various MOUs that we submitted for review and approval.
Okay, so we'll take a look at those. We'll prioritize. And you know, the important thing is, just to Mr. Rue's comments, that we have the adequate oversight that our constituencies demand of us. And so that's a step in the right direction, and I appreciate that. So just to reiterate, we'll have the concessions status draft report by April 15th at the latest. Just to reiterate that, and then we'll get that going. And with that being said, I think we're good. That concludes item 6 on the agenda. There is no other additional business, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.